Aboriginal foundational Black Americans, identity and memory. Many foundational Aboriginal Black Americans do not want to be called Black. They do not want to be called Black. They want to be called by their name, their tribal name. They want to be called by this. But your tribal name is just your heritage. Your ancestry is African. You can find out more about foundational Black Americans in my book, The Mandy in Ancient America. We are not just Africans. The Mandy in Ancient America will tell you about all of the various civilizations that have adopted the Mandy culture in the over here in the Americas. And We Are Not Just Africans tells you about the various Black Native American tribes. It will let you know that Black people can be Bay One based on culture, history, and land. These books will let you know that just as the Egyptians called themselves Kemet, the Chinese called themselves Li Min, the Sumerians called themselves Sagiga, and the Assyrians called themselves Salmat Kaladi. They called themselves these names because they were proud to be Black. They were proud to have their Black ancestry, and they knew that unity comes from being one. And to be one, Black first, is the most important thing that you can do to enrich your civilization. Yes, these ancient civilizations were proud to be B1. But do you know what? They weren't the only civilizations. There were civilizations over here in the Americas who also recognized that they were Black. We had, in a sense, the Mexica or the Aztecs. That means lords of the Black land. And in a sense, the She people, the Olmecs, they knew they were Black too. But what is the identity of Aboriginal foundational Black Americans who live on the East Coast and Midwest? Often you see these people, they seem to be looking like Lenape and the Sioux and these other Indians on the West Coast. But this is their culture. Look at those headdresses. Are those headdresses natural to this group? No, they're not natural to these groups. These headdresses are memories of the Oglala, the Sioux, the Lakota. These Indians who fought against the United States were made, in a sense, an image of what the Native Americans should look like. They felt the Native Americans should wear these bonnets, these feathered crowns. But that's not the way. The foundational Black Americans that lived on the East Coast and the Midwest, they didn't usually wear crowns like this. They wore turbans. They wore sashes around their heads. They wore other type of hats. Yes, they wore feathers, but they did not wear feathers like the people on the West Coast. And yet many Aboriginal Americans, instead of going back to their own culture and their own roots, they are going back to the roots of the Oglala, the Sioux. You see, Black people can be B1 based on culture, history. The identity of Aboriginal foundational Black Americans who live on the East Coast and Midwest should match their heritage. Yes, their heritage. Their heritage shows the greatness of their civilization. There were many foundational Black Americans. They lived in the Midwest, like Wisconsin. They were down in Mississippi. They were everywhere. Yes, the greatest people. But you know what? Those foundational Black Americans, yes, they're copying it, but it was some people who wore these crowns. For example, on the left hand side we see an Iroquois, and on the right hand side we see a king. And this king, he was spreading it because Black people can be B1 based on culture, history, and civilization. The European, they stole the heritage of the foundational Black American Aboriginals. They made it in a sense, and they began to promote the Mongoloid and white people as the real founders of the five civilized tribes. But the five civilized tribes were Black. Look here on the right hand side, the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Cree. These were Black people. Yes, Black people can be B1 based on culture, history, and land. But you must be B1. The European has always wanted to divide us. He described the Indian as the American Indian race found only in Americas of a deep copper color, straight black hair, high cheekbones, eyes, black sunken hair, sunken eyes. The African Negro, on the other hand, they have a jet black skin, low narrow forehead, black woolly hair. This is all bull because both of these people look exactly almost alike. Almost alike. When Europeans first came in contact with our Black ancestors, the Aboriginal foundational Black Americans, They decreased their numbers. Yes, they used, in a sense, diseases to kill off these black Native Americans, you know. In 1540, when DeSoto came, he found thousands and thousands of black Indians. But sadly, because of the fact that many whites gave them smallpox blankets, they died of smallpox. They used these blankets as a weapon. The English did not just murder the Pequot. The Wampanoag belonged to the Algonquin Confederacy and League of the Delaware. Although England had a treaty with the Wampanoag, their king was beheaded. Yes, he was beheaded. And for 24 years, they had his head on display. This is a great example of how the English were able to use divide and rule tactics to take control of the area. Black Indians and Mongoloid, Black Indians and black people from Africa, they were sold as slaves. Yes, they were sold as slaves at the same plane. And they were sold as slaves because of their farming skills. You see, it was from the black Indians that Europeans learned how to farm, you know. Some of the black Native American tribes, like the Blackfeet, the Cree, the Choctaw, these people, in a sense, knew how to farm. They grew the three sisters: beans, corn, and squash. And they taught Europeans how to do this. But the Europeans, in a sense, took away their heritage. They began to call the black Native Americans colored people instead of recognizing that they were the Indians. Yes, they were the original Indians. Europeans demanded, in a sense, slaves. They wanted slaves to work on their rice plantations. They wanted slaves to grow tobacco. But first, in a sense, people don't know that when the British first came in contact with black Indians, they did not, in a sense, want anything from them. They gave them smallpox, blankets, smallpox to kill them off. Britain began the black Indian slave trade. And what they did is that they would sell these black Indians that they kidnapped from North America. And they took these North American slaves and sold them into Britain, into the Caribbean, Barbados, and other places. You know, they were the first slaves. The first slaves did not come from Africa. The first slaves were black Native Americans. Black Native Americans sold each other for rum and guns. What a sad situation. They didn't recognize their blackness. Wars between black Indians and whites were manufactured to produce black slaves for whites. Yes, the English, French, and the Dutch provided the Native Americans with guns, rum, and cheap goods to purchase Native American Indian slaves between 1670 and 1720. Many black Native Americans were enslaved. Yes, Mongoloids didn't sell their people, but black Native Americans did. The black Indian slave trade decimated the black Indian population. Between 1670 and 1750, 40,000 to 50,000, some even claim 100,000 black Native Americans were sold into slavery. They worked on plantations in the Caribbean. They were treated harshly, and they were also made to work on plantations in America. Black Indians, in a sense, were made to be called colored people. This began with Benjamin Franklin, who said that you had to, in a sense, take away the black Indian heritage and give it to the Mongoloid Indian. In fact, the black Native American heritage land rights were stolen by the government, as all blacks in America, no matter their ancestry. Yes, 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 we had to move away from this divide and rule tactic. We had to move away from just saying that we're, in a sense, not black. Look, they tell you that only the Indians in America wore feathers, but here we see the Maya Indians, and we see Africans. Yes, Africans wore feathers. They may have wore turbans, but they also wore feathers. Look here we see an African Muslim with a feather in his cap. And here's a Cherokee, foundational black American. Yes, a Cherokee. And this was in the 19th century. Yes, there's no difference between, in a sense, foundational black Americans and Africans. Here we see another African Indian, another African, wearing a feathered headdress. And we see, in a sense, an Aboriginal black American wearing feather headdresses. Feathers were not unfamiliar with us. We knew about feathers. We knew about wearing these crowns. Here's a picture of my wife, Susan Winters. And here we compare her to Alice Osceola, a Seminole woman. Yes, look at that. Look how they look. But in fact, my wife, her ancestry is, in a sense, Blackfeet and Cherokee. In conclusion, due to the continuity of foundational black Americans prior and after slavery, there's no way we should return to calling ourselves solely by the names that reflect our heritage, as Muslims, Moors, Christians, Yuchi, Cherokee, and etc. Our only hope for survival, justice, and unity is to call ourselves foundational Black Americans. The name Foundational Black Americans acknowledges our lineage and our heritage.